When God was delivering the people of Israel from Egyptian slavery, He took them out of Egypt to the base of a mountain, to Mount Sinai. And there, gathered at the base of the mountain, were the people, and there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud on the mountain. And God summoned Moses to journey up Mount Sinai and met with him there. And in the dense fog, God's glory was present like a devouring fire on the mountaintop. Such was the brightness of the glory of God that Moses' face radiated when he came down off the mountain. Elijah also had a mountaintop experience. Elijah was on Mount Horeb, and God met with him, and there was an earthquake, and there was a tornado, a windstorm, and there was fire. And yet the Lord's presence was not made most known to Elijah in either of these acts of just raw power, but instead in a still small voice, in a gentle whisper. Now we're with Jesus and His disciples. They don't know it yet, but they are about to have their mountaintop experience as well. We'll let Mark tell it from Mark 9, 2 through 13, as they behold the glory of the Lord themselves. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up a high mountain where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." He did not know what to say. They were so terrified. Then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice from the cloud, "This is my Son, whom I love. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. They kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. And they asked him, "Why do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus replied, "To be sure, Elijah does come first and restores all things. Why then is it written that the Son of Man must suffer much and be rejected? But I tell you, Elijah has come, and they have done to him everything they wished, just as it is written about him." I have to imagine that Peter, James, and John had a few questions as they were traveling up the mountain with Jesus. I know for a fact they had a lot of questions once they saw Jesus in all of His radiant, brilliant glory. When the light began shining not on Jesus, but from Jesus. When they began to see this, intensely white, radiant, brilliant light that was coming from Jesus. It was as if in this moment, hard to imagine as it might be, that the glory of Christ, the glory of Jesus from before the world was created, and the glory that Jesus would soon possess as the Son of Man who died and resurrected and ascended in power, that glory was somehow visible to the disciples in this moment. The glory that they would see on the other side of the cross and resurrection somehow shining forth in this moment. And we kind of strain for words to describe what that might have been for them as they were standing there on the mountain on that day. We have Peter's own reflection on the event in 2 Peter, and he says, we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. Eyewitnesses of his majesty. And before they can catch their breath, Elijah and Moses are on the mountain with Jesus. They're talking to Jesus. Jesus, Elijah, and Moses are having a conversation on the mountainside, and these three disciples are witnessing it. Past heroes and future glory meeting together in this present, hard to imagine, hard to believe moment. You can imagine, I think, the disciples spending several minutes just trying to, pick their jaw up off the floor. What is happening here around us? Then comes the enveloping cloud all around them, linking their moment with such vividness to that journey of Moses up into the cloud on Mount Sinai all those centuries before. It's no wonder that the early church would look at Jesus and say, he is the radiance of the glory of God. You can perhaps imagine the weight of this moment. I mean, this is a heavy moment. The word glory literally means heavy, weighty. This is a weighty moment. And here is Jesus, resplendently glowing, and Moses and Elijah there. And perhaps you can see Peter there, nervously clearing his throat in order to speak. Mark tells us that Peter didn't know what to say. Mark, probably being told by Peter about this event, you almost wonder if Mark and his mentor Peter had a laugh or a nodding of the head as Mark penned those words. He did not know what to say. They were terrified. But of course, despite not knowing what to say, Peter does decide to speak anyway. Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents for you. One for you, one for Elijah, one for Moses. Let us make you a tent. And before we beat up on Peter, it's probably worth saying that we have all been there before, haven't we? Sometimes we label certain people as nervous talkers. You probably know somebody that you would say, yeah, they're a nervous talker. Anytime they have some kind of social anxiety, all of a sudden they just start talking and they can't stop talking, that kind of thing. We all do that. Some people tell jokes. Some people ask questions. Some people start rambling on about whatever it might be. But we all do that to some degree. And we can hardly blame Peter for wanting to say something. After all, one of the thought experiments that we like to rehearse in our own minds sometimes in conversation with people, if Jesus came into the room, what would you say? That kind of thing. Well, Peter's doing the best he can. He has something to say when Moses and Elijah come in. Moses, how many trips did you take up Mount Sinai? He has something to say. And he wants to serve. We can make each of you a tent. He's trying to preserve this moment. He's saying, if we can get these tents for you guys, you gentlemen, you wonderful men, if we can just get these tents, the experience can go on. The experience can continue. Moses, Elijah, no need to leave just yet. Just stick around. It's late at night. Just, you've got your tent. We've all got tents. And let's keep this good thing going. Let's come back in the morning and talk some more. But there's something deeply revealing in what Peter says to Jesus here. It's revealing not of a character defect in Peter. It's revealing of the fundamental human condition. Because Peter interrupts this sacred moment. Can you imagine Jesus, Elijah, and Moses talking? And Peter interrupts this sacred moment and says, it's good that we are here. from the background, the three disciples, they can't help it. They need to shine some light upon themselves. They insert themselves into the middle of the spotlight. It's good that we are here. Suddenly the focus has shifted from the glowing Christ to the disciples. And this is the human condition. Even in the best moments, even in the most holy moments, something in us wants to drag ourselves into the center, to turn the attention on our contribution, our ability, our usefulness, our importance, whatever it might be. Even when we mean well, just like Peter, we can easily detract from the glory of Christ and make it about ourselves. We want to build our booths, we want to build our tents, just like Peter. When someone is going through a tragedy, let's say, or perhaps a severe illness, it is so difficult for us not to start talking about ourselves, isn't it? I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you this morning. It is hard for us to resist talking about our own experience or the experience of someone that we love, or worst of all, probably our advice to them as they go through whatever it is that they're going through from our perspective and our wisdom. And like Peter, we can look at them and say, it is good that I'm here. It's good that I'm here. It can happen with the best of intentions. There was a lady, Suzanne. She had retired, and she wanted to do something good with her extra time. She wanted to serve in some way. And one of the things that she loved to do, she loved to bake. And she happened to be a very gifted pie baker. She made all the most delicious pies. And so she started looking for opportunities for people in the church or adjacent, that she could take a pie. And so she would find somebody, maybe in the bulletin, the prayer list, whatever. She would identify someone. She would bake the pie. She would go to the door, knock on the door, and here's this warm pie. Hey, I'm just thinking about you because I know you're going through this and just want you to have this. And, that was all. But it was this sacred, wonderful moment there on the porch or on the patio as she's handing over the pie. Well, others heard about Suzanne's pies. And pretty soon, there was a motion to start a pie baking ministry at the church, And soon, Suzanne found herself going to pie baking meetings. And soon, Suzanne found herself, she had boxes for her pies that now had the church logo on them, and a schedule of how to, this week and this weekend and so forth. And pretty soon she was running a nonprofit pie baking business. But she couldn't remember the last time she actually took someone a pie. And even when she did, she couldn't remember the last time she took someone a pie that she knew. Now it was all about the pies. No longer intimate, no longer personal. And I love ministries, I love organization, right? But sometimes we end up trying to build tents in what we're doing, trying to capture and reproduce. Lord, it's good we're here. We can take it from here. We can put ourselves in the spotlight, just like Peter. Again, I do not doubt for one moment that Peter wanted to make a positive contribution. Only God wasn't looking for Peter's contribution in this moment. He let Peter know that. Because as soon as the words leave Peter's lips, the cloud thickens, and the voice from heaven, the voice of God, cuts Peter's proposal off. As Peter opens his mouth to speak, God says, "This is the Son that I love. Listen to him." Listen to him. It is not the moment for Peter to be thinking about himself. It's the moment for Peter to listen to Jesus. As we were thinking about, what would you say to Jesus if he came in the room maybe this story suggests that we ought to wait for him to say something to us, Still, it seems only fair for us, listening to Mark, hearing the voice from heaven, "This is my son, listen to him." It seems only fair for us to respond back to God and to say, "We've been saying the same thing to Peter for 9 chapters now. We get it. How many times have we seen the disciples misunderstand Jesus? At this point, it's basically getting old, Will somebody just listen to the man?" In a span of a couple of chapters here, Jesus foretells his death and his resurrection, his suffering, his death and his resurrection 3 times to all the disciples. Once, Peter rebukes Jesus, "It'll never happen on my watch." Twice, the disciples respond to Jesus' prediction by arguing about which one of them is the greatest. Even here, coming down the mountain, Jesus has told them about his suffering and resurrection, and they don't get it. They keep it to themselves because they say, I don't understand what he's talking about. How could this be? Why can't the disciples seem to hear what Jesus is saying? And maybe it's because Jesus is saying exactly the opposite of what they believed he would say their entire life. They expected Jesus, as you probably know, to come in glory and power, like they're witnessing there on the mountaintop. This is the guy that we signed up to follow. There's no rebuking Jesus when he's radiating the glory of God on the mountain. Whoa, maybe not. No, it's good that we're here, But when Jesus comes off the mountain and explains that the road to that glory will be the road of sacrifice, suffering, and death, they can't hear it. They can't handle it. They can't believe it. Can we blame them? Is it really any easier for you and me to understand that the path to glory is the path of suffering and sacrifice? Is it really any easier for us to hear the words of Jesus to his disciples as if he's speaking to us? "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it." Or what about these words a few moments later? "Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." I know that Jesus suffered and died. We believe that. That's why we're here. We see the form, right? This is the thing that actually happened. But is it any easier for us to understand the substance of that, to see that the road to glory is the road to sacrifice, and to believe that that is true in our own lives as well? Is it really any easier for us than it was for them? It made no sense to them that the Son of Man, pictured as this, powerful king with unending glory and dominion, it made no sense to them that he would come to the earth and be conquered, tortured, and killed. How could the Savior give himself away? How could the Savior ascend to reign and rule if he was in fact laid low? I'm not sure it makes sense to us either. Everything in our culture prioritizes things like upward mobility, strength, achievement, accomplishment, all of those kinds of things. It dawns on me that one of the overriding philosophies of our way of life is the idea of peace through strength. I heard someone interviewed the other day. In the interview, he said this: "We have learned that whatever their side does," doesn't matter which side, "we've learned that whatever their side does, we have to be willing to do. Whatever lines they cross, we must cross. It's the only way." How can it be that the Son of Man, though existing in the radiance of the glory of God, came to suffer and serve and die? How can we actually believe that weakness is the way to strength, that sacrifice is the path to glory? Lord, it's a great sentiment. Let's put up a tent. Let's reconvene. Let's talk about it in the morning. We'll come back to this tomorrow. The voice of God booms from the cloud. This is my Son, whom I love. And there's an exclamation, emphatic, listen to him. Suddenly the fog lifts. The disciples look, and there's only Jesus. Moses and Elijah, they're gone. Righteous and wise as they were, they vanish. Only Jesus. It is as if you cannot understand glory unless you understand it through the lens of only Jesus. It would be easier if God had revealed glory in something other than Jesus alone. If true power, true peace, true life were found in something a bit less extreme, Jesus only. It would be easier if we could keep Jesus' good advice. Certainly we want to keep his forgiveness, right? But we could also keep some good old-fashioned common sense about how things really work in the real world. It would be great if we could have Jesus, but also our favorite talking head, or the advice of our parents, or even of your favorite preacher. Not that he's up here, but we want, yes, what you're saying, Jesus. That's pretty extreme. Maybe let's bring in somebody. Let's bring Moses and Elijah in. They're gone, Who could I listen to today that would be better than listening to Moses or Elijah? They're gone. It's only Jesus. It's a fascinating thing to watch Jesus. It's a fascinating thing when we get this privilege of listening to Jesus through the Gospel of Mark. Because what we see as we start listening and as we start watching Jesus, we find that there are only 3 times in the Gospel of Mark where Jesus is called God's Son. The first time is at his baptism. Similar voice from heaven. The second time is this moment right here. But do you remember the third time when Jesus will be called God's Son? It wasn't by Peter. It wasn't by the other disciples. It wasn't the divine voice calling from the cloud. Jesus is seen as the Son of God in glory in his moment of absolute weakness. In the climax of his suffering. Because there's someone there who, despite all the people around the cross, someone saw Jesus only at the foot of the cross. And in order to make the statement that is made, there has to be a total reversal of this person's core values. From power to weakness, from judging to forgiving, from taking to giving. It's the Roman soldier at the foot of the cross, maybe the same one who drove the nails into his hands. And Mark says that Jesus did not do some show of strength from the cross that opened his eyes, but in the way when he saw how he died, he said, "Truly, this is the Son of God." This is the Son of God. Jesus gave himself away in order to bring you near, in order to show you a new way, in order to give us new life. If you're here this morning and you haven't chosen to follow Jesus yet, we want to offer you the invitation this morning that you might be immersed into Christ. And if you're following Jesus this morning, I pray that we would go back to the gospel over and over again and have our life saturated in the way of Jesus. It's a challenging thing, but for us, we believe in Jesus and Jesus only. If you have any needs, you're welcome to come as we stand and sing.